Anyway, I told Justice Schaefer, he called me at home, it was about 7:30 in the morning. I told him that I really would like to talk over with my wife. I've made a lot of changes in my career, and I really can't make that decision without consulting her. And he said, well, I understand that. He said, but I'm going to make the announcement at 2 o'clock, so you have until noon to get back to me. So I talked to my wife, and she took a vow of poverty and said, yes, go ahead. If you want to do it, do it. But I knew that I had to talk to somebody else. I would be accepting an interim appointment, but then I'd have to run in the general election a year and a half from then.
Right.
And it would be a contested election. And in those days, you had to be slated by the Democratic Party of Cook County.
Correct.
We know who that was. That was the mayor. So I did what any thinking person would do. I immediately called Kay Spear, the mayor's secretary, who got in very early in the morning, and said, I have a personal matter I have to talk to the mayor about. You think you could get me in? So she said, well, come down right away. I'm sure we can find a minute or two. And sure enough, I got in there. I didn't have to wait very long. And she ushered me in to see the mayor. And the mayor sat there again behind his empty desk, Buddha style, folding his hands, looking at me, and exchanged pleasantries. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I've been offered a great honor to be the first interim appointment to the Circuit Court of Cook County. But it's a big step for me because my practice is just going well. I'm going to have to leave my practice, and I really don't want to take that position unless I felt that I would have the support of the Democratic Party when I had to run for election a year and a half from now. And he looked at me and in effect gave me his blessing. I'm sure he knew, because in those days he knew everything that was going on, although he never told me he knew, or Schaefer never told me that he had mentioned it to Daley. But in my heart of hearts, I knew he knew, because I knew that he knew everything. So I thanked him and I left. And in those days, you may recall, there were payphones in the lobby of City Hall. I had a lot of change in my pocket. I went down to the payphone, put a lot of coins in, picked up the phone and called Schaefer, and I said, Mr. Justice Schaefer, I'd be honored to accept the appointment. It was after my visit to the Daily. And those are some of the highlights.
Did a year and a half later the party endorse you as a candidate?
Well, that's another story. The answer is that the legislature didn't get the enabling legislation done in time. So in effect, I served as an inter-appointment for 3.5 years. I was serving as probably the best assignment, I thought, in the Circuit Court of Cook County. I was in the criminal division trying felony cases, but only cases where the defendants were out on bond and only private lawyers. So it was really the cream, the criminal practice. And those cases were heard at the Civic Center, not at 26th in California. The chief judge of the criminal division at that time was Joe Power, a former law partner of the mayor. At that time, there was no random assignment of cases. After an indictment, the case would go to the chief judge, and he would decide who ought to get the case. Right. Okay? The state's attorney at that time was Bernie Carey, Republican. And he decided to indict Tom Keene, alderman of the 11th Ward. And
not 11.
Of this, alderman of the
37th.
37th, yeah. Right. Excuse me. And the floor leader for the mayor. And coincidentally, chair of the nominating committee of the Democratic Party. I had a fairly decent reputation, and the case was a terrible case. It was truly a political indictment, and one that wouldn't pass, couldn't successfully pass a motion to dismiss. So rather than send it to somebody on the bench who usually handled dismissing those political cases, he sent it to me because he thought on the merits the case was going to go away. Except Joe Power didn't figure that about 2 or 3 months after the assignment, before the case would go to trial, I'd have to appear before the slate-making committee.
Oh.
So I thought about it for a while, and I decided there's only one thing I could do. I would have to recuse myself because it was a clear conflict of interest as far as I was concerned. And although I'd be hailed by the Democratic Party for taking a bullet for the cause, as a lawyer, as a judge, my credibility would be irrevocably damaged. Now, the politic thing to do at that point, I suppose, in those days, would have been to contact Daley and give him a heads up that I was going to do that. But I didn't. I didn't for a couple of reasons, because I honestly didn't think that was the right thing to do.
Yes, I agree with that.
And secondly, even if I thought it was the right thing to do, the mayor might have looked me in the eye and said, "No, you can't do that, Marv. You got to keep the case." And then he would be more TO'd at me when I got rid of it,
Right.
than he was when, in fact, I actually got rid of the case. So I recused myself, and at that time, Tom Keene was livid. One of your good friends, Ed Rooney, came to me and said, "Marv," he said, "I think you," who was a reporter covering the criminal courts at the time, and a good friend, said to me, he said, "You took the high road, and I'm proud of you." He said, "I'm not sure you took the successful road, though." So it was, it was a calculated decision that I made, but it was the right one. Tom Keene was livid and was let the word go out that, yeah, we can't stop slating you, but you still got to win the election. That's the word that got back to me.
Okay.
Which indicated to me that I wasn't going to get much help. I was running against a woman on the Republican side who had written a book. I forget her name, Barbara something. She eventually married the guy who owned the W Hotel on Adams Street.
Okay.
But at the time, she was going around to all the talk show programs on television hawking her book, and I was panicking. She was getting all this publicity. The Democratic Party is not going to be supportive. I'm going to lose the election. But I got a good committee. Ray Simon and Jerry Salve were my 2 campaign chairs. And I ran scared. And it turned out that nobody really damaged me that well. And I led the circuit court ticket in spite of my panic. But I think Daley was very upset with me, although he never said anything. And the next time I saw him after that was about a couple months before he died.
76.
Pardon?
1976.
Yeah, a few months before he died. And he said he wanted to talk to me about some legislation that wouldn't be before me. And would I come over and see him? It was some First Amendment stuff, and he still had visions of me after all these years being a First Amendment expert.
Okay.
So we talked, just very theoretically about what you can do and what you can't do legislatively without getting in trouble in First Amendment. Spent about a half an hour, very pleasant, asked about my family, and it was like old times, and I really felt very good about that conversation, especially when he died a few months later, that our relationship ended on, a very positive, friendly note as opposed to a disappointed note, perhaps on his part, when I had dumped the Keene case. By the way, The Keene case, as a footnote, was eventually thrown out of court, and after that, as you know, Keene was indicted in the federal court
right.
in a real case and convicted.
Yes, I'd forgotten that that state indictment even existed.
Yeah.
Because it was as you characterized it.
I think Dan Ryan was the attorney it was assigned to after me.
Dan Ryan was?
Mm.
Oh, well, that ended the problem.
Yeah.
You've discussed the censorship board. I wanted to ask you two questions before we then go back to the mayor for summary. You served for a while on the mayor's committee against organized crime. Was there anything when you did that, I mean, I found this in a clip, that was of any interest at all?
Well, I think that might have been. I served on 3 different things outside of my regular corporation council responsibilities that the mayor assigned me to do. One was to draft legislation, and that might have been it, that dealt with organized crime.
It was that.
And State Senator Stevenson, Adlai 3, was in the legislature at that time, handling all kinds of criminal legislation. And I put together a city package. If you ask me what the bills were, I don't remember them today, but I remember we had a city package. I remember Adlai Stevenson had a package that his staff was worked on, and Dan Ward, another name in the past, who was then president of the Chicago Crime Commission, had put together his package. So the 3 of us and staff people, Dan Walker, Senator Stevenson, and myself, worked together to put a consolidated legislative package together. And that was what I worked on at that time. I met Adlai Stevenson for the first time.
Now, did the mayor get any, I mean, it was his committee, supposedly. Did he involve himself in that at all?
No, not at all. The other assignment that the mayor gave me was to be an attorney for the Motion Picture Appeal Board of the City of Chicago. And this is a great insight as to how the mayor worked. As you may recall, the initial licensing scheme for films, the application went before the Motion Picture Licensing Board, which was composed of widows of police captains and aldermen, as I recall.
That's what we call the censorship board.
The censorship board, yeah. There were very, very nice, respectable, conservative older ladies. And they usually did things exactly the way I'm sure the mayor and the administration wanted it to be done.
Without asking.
Oh, yeah, without asking.
Yeah.
But I had nothing to do with them, okay. But the mayor had put in, at the behest of people before I became involved, an appeal board, so that if people complained about this board with no qualifications, at least they'd have some place to go for a decision. And that really was a blue ribbon board, but the mayor seated it with 3 conservatives and 2 liberals, so that it took something really bad for the censor board to be overruled, although the board did occasionally. And he had wonderful people on it. Henry Rago, the editor of Poetry Magazine, Nur Littner, a child psychiatrist, John Cusack, a very good lawyer. His brother was eventually a judge at the time, and Matt Shanebaum, who was on the faculty of Loyola University. Okay. Really good people. And that was a very honest administrative process. However, they needed a lawyer. And so I would sit with them on their deliberations. Even when they screened the film,